So, hello and welcome to a new segment by the Gaming Reporter. It's called Seriously Informal, where we discuss issues concerning the gaming industry. And of course, at some point in time, we would very much like to take this format offline and have these kind of chats in a more informal setup. But for now, let's welcome our guests. We have Rishi Alwani with us. Rishi is a seasoned gaming journalist who reports on the Indian and Japanese gaming industry. Hi, Rishi.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So our second guest is Saloni Sehgal. Saloni is a general partner at Lumikai, which is a gaming-focused VC fund. Hi, Saloni.
Hi guys.
So third in line is Nimish Roth. Nimish is India lead at Fnatic, which is an esports organization based out of London. Hi, Nimish.
Hey guys.
And we have Ishan Arya, who is the co-founder of an esports organization called the Esports Club. Hi, Ishan.
Hi Rahul, thanks for having me.
So let us all first take initial reactions and on this ban of this hugely popular game called PUBG. It sort of became a cult and even addiction for some of them, you know. So much so that we have been reading about youngsters doing all sort of things for the game, right from emptying their parents' bank accounts. We just read that to skipping sleep and meals for days, and some of them actually dying with heart attacks and whatnot. It's crazy. So having said that, the game was also a source of revenue for a lot of gamers and esports companies. And in my opinion, it is the most popular game when it comes to esports. Of course, you can counter me on that. But let's start with you, Rishi. What is your reaction to PUBG ban and what is the justification to this ban?
So, the impact's been pretty obvious. I mean, you said it straight up, right? That there's a complete revenue loss, and it's not just for content creators. It's something we're seeing for tournament organizers. It's something we're seeing for international teams. So there are a couple of international esports teams that want to come into India, and now have to rework their entire plan because you have this one game which had mad viewership stats that is not a part of the equation anymore. And at the same time, you also have a situation where it's not just teams and it's just not just tournament organizers or content creators. You even have accessory manufacturers who I've been speaking to, and they've also seen a hit because of this. So, but it's also important to understand that from a macro level view, it's not just a question of PUBG being banned. It's a question of games from other companies like Yuzu and NetEase, both of which actually, I mean, in Yuzu's case, they actually have an India team that's developing in India. So they've been impacted as well. So it's a net loss in the short term. And even for non-endemics who want to invest in gaming, who look at the PUBG viewership numbers, that's not there anymore. So imagine if I'd hate to be in a tournament organizer's shoes where you've been selling a brand on the idea of sponsoring them for PUBG, but then all that viewership is gone, and your next best option is something like maybe like Free Fire, which is half the numbers at best case. So there's a net loss impact in the short term, but I think in the long term, people will find a different game to play. Now, as for the reasons for the ban, I mean, I'm no policy expert. I'm no expert on cyber law, but the reason given has been because of issues with privacy. Now, I don't know how accurate that is, because I think on July 30th, if I'm not mistaken, Tencent had said that they put their servers in India, and they said that all India data remains in India. So I don't know if that's still a problem, but the impact is pretty huge across the board in the short term.
Sure. Saloni, what's your reaction? Wasn't there a way around?
Our horizon is a lot longer in terms of the way we look at what happens in an ecosystem. I think there are, as Rishi says, there are short-term implications, there are medium-term implications, and then what happens in the long term. So I think the way we look at it is PUBG's entry was seminal to Indian gaming from many aspects. Esports is still a very small part of that. It's still a niche, but in terms of just content consumption of it, PUBG unlocked gaming for, I'd say, most of India, right? It became almost a phenomenon. It was multiplayer, it was social. It inherently appealed to the digital sociology of Indian users. And to some extent, it put India on the map, because even for PUBG, it validated two things. One is that Indians as a consumer base consume games, and second is Indians actually do pay. So it was able to validate those hypotheses, which I believe the Indian gaming industry has been and the fraternity has been talking about, but never really saw that materialize until the evolution and the phenomena that became of PUBG. Now, in the short term, I think there is so let's look at there's the content piece and then there's the esports piece. I think Rishi's already talked about the esports piece, and you've got Nimish and Ishan here who will be able to shed more light on it. I think from the content piece, right, like there's clearly a void which is going to be left in terms of the games that people can consume. So the question will become, what do people who were currently playing PUBG migrate to? Is it going to be a Free Fire? Is it going to be a Call of Duty? Or is it going to be some other titles? That's one. Is it going to be made up by foreign developers at the moment, or is there going to be Indian content developers who will be able to rise to the occasion? We've clearly heard the announcements of Encore Games and their 4G game, which has just about been announced. And so that's in the short term. Now, our sense is that in the short term, it's going to, at least for domestic developers to be able to fill that void, it's going to be quite difficult. You can't produce a game which is a mid-core shooter like a PUBG level of mechanics and depth overnight. Even if that game has been 6 months in the making, it still requires a lot more to go into pushing that game out and building an ecosystem around it. So I believe that there will be some short-term void. Now, in the long term, what does this yield? We're definitely seeing entrepreneurs come to us with much more ambitious projects, not just about building battle royale games, but in general, there is a lot more ambition with the kind of content Indian developers want to put out there, which is quite heartening to see, which also validates our hypothesis as a venture fund being able to back gaming companies. And so I think in the long term, it's a net positive. Now, also, I'd like to point out, India was 25% of PUBG's downloads. I don't know whether it's enough to be able to say are they going to give up that easily for this market? I think there are going to be certain workarounds. There are going to be certain steps that would probably be underway already in the respective organizations, which could potentially mean that there is potential and some future for this game. I don't think we're going to entirely be able to wish it away in some form. So yeah, I think there are challenges, there are opportunities, and in short-term loss, long-term net positive for the industry. I think it's unlocked the ability for people to look at India as a serious gaming market and put it on the world map. So,
Sure, Saloni. We'll come back to what you just said. But Nimish, what are your thoughts? Are we hurting our own people and organizations to give China some mild shocks? Do you think this is right?
Well, I think so. So there are two ways to look at this, right? One is at a political level, what is the impact of something like this? I mean, say almost $40 billion getting out of the valuation of Tencent. Does that really hurt them? I think they're used to it. If you look at the way Tencent has gone up and down in the last few years, for them,
WeChat ban as well.
Yeah, I'm saying the point is, it sounds a lot. Like $40 million gone out of the valuation sounds a lot, but for Tencent, they're used to this. The game makes a comeback, and then they will add another $80 billion to their valuation immediately, right? So I don't think that impact is something that we could be like, oh, look, we've already created a huge impact on Tencent. Now suddenly the China guys are going to be like, okay, let's pull the soldiers out the border now. I mean, say, what I don't understand is that how does this impact anything to do with what's going to happen at the border? I don't think China, at least the way China's behaved, they don't really care. The business aspect and the defense aspect or the political aspects are two different things completely. And we've seen that time and time again. So that leaves us with the question saying that was this a PR move? Was this a way to just basically make it relevant? Because they've banned stuff before and nobody gave like a rat's ass about it. So adding PUBG obviously suddenly puts the government in the limelight. Now they suddenly become nationalists and everything revolves around India, and it revolves around Dharti Mata and all of that stuff. And again, I'm not saying that it's the wrong thing to do or the right thing to do, but from a fanatic perspective, I think we are very, very clear that this game will make a comeback eventually in some shape or form. So till that time, we just need to figure out a way to continue engaging with the audiences that love Fnatic and love esport. There are alternate games, but I am not somebody who would advise any of my players to now suddenly shift to a different game, because it's like saying, if you're not a cricketer, go try and become a baseball player. It doesn't work like that, right? You can play for fun, you can play for streams, you can play for audiences just to like engage with them. But as a career, you clearly chose PUBG Mobile over any other game because you were good at that game, right? So if that's not what you're going to play, then I would advise them seriously to think about a different career. Unless and until they are very clear that they will actually grind and become as good as they were in PUBG Mobile in some other title, and that title can actually give them the bread and butter that PUBG Mobile gave them. You know, that's pretty much the direction that we are taking as of right now.
Yeah. So, Ishan, how do you see the ban helping or not helping people?
So the ban's definitely, going to have a long-term impact that we're going to feel, because PUBG Mobile, for better or for worse, it's what's taken gaming from a hobby or a pastime to something that the country by and large is now aware of, right? While gaming still may not have that positive uh, sentiment, it has awareness, which is a huge deal. Because up until now we always talked about, is India the next potential big market for gaming and esports, and PUBG Mobile has proved that the Indian audience is very much interested in that sort of content. Now the ban, it seems like it's a bit of a band-aid solution to a larger problem, right? Data privacy is a major concern, but outright banning apps one by one, it's not going to solve the problem. But it's more of a political statement saying, hey, we're going to take a stand, and it's one that's trying to get the headlines. In terms of more negative effects of it, as some of the guys mentioned, there's a lot of people who are invested in the space. A lot of the growth for gaming is driven by it. Most of India's esports organizations, the talent, the producers, the broadcasters, the organizers, all of them are focused heavily around the PUBG Mobile space. And these are people with large scale studios, or just maybe 20, 30 man organizations who run smaller mid tier events, and for them it's their bread and butter, and they do not have the resources to quickly pivot to something else which some of the larger organizations may have. And these guys are the ones putting out the content and driving this esports content and growth for the country, and now they are in trouble, and by and large that ripple effect is going to be seen throughout the industry.
Sure, Ishan, thank you for that. And Rishi, coming back to you, and tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time, a lot of money to build something as big as PUBG. And do you think in such a scenario, brands like Activision, who has just cut ties with Tencent, and then there is Garena, they'll be able to fill the void and become the next cult in the mobile gaming space?
So let me just address one point you just made right now. Activision has not cut ties with Tencent. That's been fake news that's been floated for the past 2-3 weeks. And so if you notice, that's only been done by two sites. A lot of the mainstream press did not cover this because Activision has not commented on this. I've reached out to people at Activision and Tencent as well, and what I've heard from my people at both places is that this has not happened. So that is definitely fake news at this point in time. What I will say in terms of other companies filling the void, let's get real here. It isn't enough for a game just to be good for it to be successful. You're right. You need to have a huge push. You need to build an ecosystem out, and that's what Tencent did. They basically spent a ton to get YouTubers on board. I've heard content creators getting paid between 20 to 40 lakhs during the first month of PUBG Mobile's India launch just to stream the game exclusively for a month and a half. And there were a ton of people who made their money to begin with moves like that. And they also had their PMCO. They also built up an esports ecosystem. So all of that takes a lot of capital. For them, the gain they weren't making money on India. The ROI on India is probably a rounding error. But the valuation, yes, as Nimish brought out, is what was important to them. It was a valuation play. India has a valuation play for them. Do I see someone coming to the table and filling that void? To a degree, yes. I do think that we will see Garena make a few moves in this space. They already have a team. They've been building up a team. They have people on the ground who are looking at communities, who are looking at anti-cheat, who are looking at serving the market in a more localized fashion. We're seeing that with the Hrithik Roshan tie-in. I think they're more likely. Activision, from what I'm aware of, is still going to take some time. Because if you look at how Activision operates, even on a global level, they're the kind of company who's still, for better or worse right now, still more focused on the overall Call of Duty brand. And for them, with the new Black Ops game coming out, that's still, if in my opinion, that's going to be the immediate focus. Once that's out of the way, perhaps they'll throw resources in this direction. So I think Activision's still going to take some time. From an India standpoint, it's going to be interesting to see, because I will say this much: that it is abundantly clear for any developer at this point in time. They are aware of two things. One is that, cost to create a midcore, as Saloni said, is expensive. And it's not just the cost of the game; it's the cost of running operations around the game. So we're talking about your live ops, your metrics, how do you keep people engaged, what the retention mechanics are, what subscriptions are you going to have, the entire gamut. All right. So Indian developers, could we see an Indian studio come in and fill the void? I don't think that's something we'll see in the short term. Maybe in the long term, provided there's enough money thrown at the problem. It's literally that, not a question of talent as much as it is of sustaining the game. Because for them, is it going to be a valuation play? Is it going to be a play of an ROI play? How they manage that will be interesting to see. But yeah, for the short term, I would say that the international guys are more poised to take it on. Locally, assuming someone's got a good enough plan, a good enough strategy, and access to the right people for a funding situation, that could work out.
Funding and all, let's bring Saloni into picture. Saloni, you're watching the industry very closely. Tell me, a ban or no ban, do you think Indian games have what it takes to sweep the youngsters off their ground? And at the most, what we have heard and seen is a ripped off poster, and a game with a similar sounding name as something which is expected to replace PUBG overnight.
We've not been a country which has played games. We haven't had traditionally a gaming culture. Gaming has also had multiple false starts. So there were these entrepreneurs who were previously building, let's say, gaming 1.0 genres of games, and it's only come to a point where now it was a nascent industry. The Geo supernova that happened basically helped unlock the fact that, okay, people are now consuming content and people are now consuming games. Traditionally, we have seen developers do well when they have harnessed Indian mechanics and they build certain verticalized niches, whether they've gone for those Rummy, the Teen Patti, the Octro style of games. They've kind of built on the backs of that, and those games have now become profitable. They're large, they're sustainable, they're now looking potentially for exits. Now there is that historical genre of these entrepreneurs that we've seen. The second kind of categories of content makers and entrepreneurs that we are seeing, and this is obviously not just esports but much broader, is there two other kinds. One is the kind of founder who's coming from experienced games companies or experienced producers who are now venturing out on their own, and they've got a much bolder vision in terms of the kind of content they want to build. It's not mid-core at the moment, but there is a lot more games that we're seeing around the multiplayer casual social element that is emerging from the ecosystem. And then there is a third younger founder, who is Generation Z, has grown up playing Clash of Clans and Minecraft and Roblox, and they have a very inherent sense of what it takes to build good games and what it takes to build good social mechanics. And now we're seeing those kind of entrepreneurs come through. Obviously, capital is only one part of the problem for game development. They require access to the right publishing teams. They require access to analytical sophistication. They require access to the kind of design talent. So that is a much broader piece of the puzzle that at Lumika we're helping to solve for games companies. And it's not going to be an overnight process. We have seen, and every market that we have tracked has gone through inflection points where they were first dominated by foreign titles. If you go back and trace China back in the early 2000s, 80% of the revenue of Chinese gaming was made by South Korean and Taiwanese titles. The Legend of Mir in 2000 was the top grossing title in China. In 2006, 2007, the Chinese market had seen enough inflection points in terms of the internet penetration, smartphone proliferation, etc. And then, you started seeing game developers build for content for China. It was also the same time where Chinese became much more nationalistic and started consuming games which were Chinese content built for Chinese people. And, NetEase launched Fantasy Westward Journey, Pan Am Games launched another MMORPG. And that happened within a span of 2-3 years, which saw domestic Chinese companies then become market leaders. Now, does that mean that it's going to happen in India? Maybe not. But can we agree to the fact that India has achieved an inflection point in terms of game consumption, game monetization, game usage, and infrastructure? Yes. Is there short-term content out there which is built for India by India? maybe not at the kind of global scale that we're seeing. Can we get there? Well, that's our thesis, and that's why we're here. So, I would say that it's still, we're early stages of a gaming market. A PUBG ban in a short term is a bit of a blow. I wouldn't write off PUBG at the moment, and I think this is a long term opportunity now to catalyze Indian developers and Indian entrepreneurs to start building for the gaming market.
Sure, point taken, Saloni. And Nimish can help us understand which are the other games then in that case, which are expected to take PUBG's place in the esports world particularly. And Nimish has already said that gamers who played PUBG might not shift to other games overnight. So, Nimish, what are your views?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer because one of the major reasons why esports is what esports is because the community decides whether something's going to be worthy enough to be competitive or not, right? I mean, say, and the perfect example for that is while like my friends at Garena have tried really, really hard to make sure that the game is competitive. The reality is that while there's a community for Free Fire, I mean, say it's just not at the same level as some of the other esports, And same is with Call of Duty Mobile, While Call of Duty as a title has done really, really well, Call of Duty Mobile, everyone is expecting it to be like the next best thing when it comes to esports on mobile, and it just never went anywhere. So it's very, very hard to kind of pinpoint saying that this is a game that could be the next big thing, because I think that's a literally it's a time will tell and wait and watch kind of a situation, which is something that everyone has to deal with. But the two titles that I feel potentially have the required publisher power and the required, because I played both those games. One is Wild Rift, which during my Riot days I was fortunate enough to look at multiple beta stages of the game and finally play the version that was supposed to release early 2020, which got delayed again. But that game, with Mobile Legends Bang Bang and Arena of Valor being banned in the country, if Wild Rift is marketed well, there is a market to capture when it comes to the mobile audience. But again, it's not going to be massive, but it'll be worth something for sure. The second one, which could be a good replacement eventually, is Apex Legends on mobile. Which again, I don't know when it's going to, because we've been hearing for a long time it's coming. But again, I would say from an overall, just the look and feel of the game, just the depth of the game, I think these Apex Legends would definitely be on my top of the list in that sense. And I don't know. I'm saying I'm not saying that I don't believe in Indian game developers, but the reality is that for an Indian game developer to actually come up with a game that then eventually is appreciated by the community, which then eventually they have the money to actually pump in and create a esports scene. I've managed esports league, and I'm telling you the amount of money that you earn, it's crazy. And I don't think anyone in India has that kind of appetite, because, and Saloni could be the right person to talk about this, because people expect returns in India in literally like 3 or 4 years. And this also is true to mainstream sport, because I come from mainstream sports, and people just don't understand the amount of investment that it takes to actually build a product. And esports is a constant burn of cash. And everyone, so it's like in the publisher world, everyone apart from the esports team doesn't believe in esports. Everyone's just like, you're spending money, you're just like wasting money, what is this even giving? Even something as big as League of Legends, the amount of shit that the esports team would get from the publishing team at Riot for the amount of money that they would spend on League of Legends esport was crazy. But it's like one of those things, like where can the game actually survive without esports? Yeah, it can, but the esports adds that required flair to it, right? I would say today PUBG could have survived without esports. People were playing the game and stuff. But esports is what actually made it more popular, made it more like accessible to everyone, right? People who didn't even know anything about PUBG Mobile. Like, I'll give an example. Yes, just day before yesterday, I was playing in the complex with my children, and there was a 10-year-old kid who came up to me because I was wearing a Fnatic jersey, and he's like, "Hey, do you know Scout?" And I asked this kid, how old are you? And he said, I'm 10 years old. And I was like, how the hell do you know Scout? He's like, oh, because of PUBG. You know? And that's when I realized, like, that the impact that this game has had is massive. Because ideally, that 10-year-old kid would probably ask me, oh, you work in the IPL, or do you know Virat, or do you know this one? But now the times change, right? And I think that is the impact that PUBG Mobile had, and I think that's what we want to miss. Because I don't know any other title that would be able to create something like that. I don't know when the next 10-year-old kid will come and ask me, I don't know, do you know somebody who plays Valorant, or do you know somebody who plays, any other title? I don't see that happening in the next year and a half. So.
Absolutely, Nimish, bang on. But Ishan, the Esports Club is fairly a new organization. And did the ban impact your revenues or future plans to a great extent, or all is well at the Esports Club?
So Touchwood, we're fine. We're only a year old, but we had taken a very conscious decision when we started that, hey, we're not going to be jumping on the mobile bandwagon just yet, mainly because there were too many players in the space. We didn't want to be just another organizer of PUBG Mobile tournaments. And we came from a PC esports background, so we wanted to play to our strengths and have been continuing to do so for the past year, creating different long format IPs, stepping away from the tried and tested esports formats that Indian audience are used to, even with PUBG Mobile. To try and bring that experience much closer to traditional sports with long format tournaments that will genuinely aid in the development of the ecosystem rather than create short term blips for marketing goals for either publishers or brands. So we've been working in that direction ever since, but I'd be lying if I said PUBG Mobile wasn't on our radar. The idea was eventually to establish our PC foothold before expanding into mobile, where we would be competing with other large organizations who have a significant head start over us. So PUBG Mobile wasn't the only mobile title that was on our radar. We're in touch with multiple publishers, and a lot of things are still on track. So that's what I said. As a organization who is self-sufficient at this point, we're not month to month or overly dependent on any single game or IP. We are in a very comfortable position to reevaluate our strategy right now. However, the country is full of hundreds of organizations, right? These are 10 people, 15 people, 20 people, and these are, some might even be 16 to 18-year-old kids who have come together and organized some of the larger PUBG Mobile tournaments with like 3, 4, 5 lakhs worth of prize money. Now these guys, they're not going to be in as comfortable a position to completely pivot, learn how to operate a different game, acquire talent to broadcast a different game, and that's where the real impact is going to be.
Right, Ishan. So, Rishi, it looks like more like a strategy to me. Ban hugely popular Chinese apps so that Indians wake up to create a replica of the product and then try and fill the void. Basically, how is it helping the economy in good ways? First, you take away the employment from some and then you give employment to some. Isn't collateral damage huge in such cases? Briefly, if you can tell me.
So, I mean, that's a very valid point, and I kind of agree with you. Yes, it does seem like a body blow to the economy in one way. But if you put it in a perspective, right? I look at it this way: would if gaming is highly visible, gaming may not have the revenue or doesn't contribute to the economy as much versus other sectors, like let's say power or chemicals or pharma, and other sectors that actually have a larger chunk of China in on it, right? Like even mobile phones for that matter. Notice how Xiaomi OnePlus hasn't been affected. And if you look at it, it's a question of priority, right? We want to send a message, and it just so happens that gaming is a convenient one because it's highly visible. So the approach here is, on one end, you want to send a message that's highly visible in an industry that may not have as much revenue but has a lot of visibility, and that people will be aware that, okay, this government is taking stuff seriously. So that's one way of looking at it. And I don't know. While I do agree that yes, it is a bit of a concern for the industry, it's a short-term concern. What I've seen is suddenly Indian developers I've been in touch with are suddenly aware of the potential that they can unlock in the market. and I'm seeing this firsthand. In the last since PUBG has been banned in the last week, I have not been sleeping. I've been on call with developers for almost every day this entire week, and all of them are suddenly more hyped. They're more ready to come to the party and develop good stuff. So I think that's one part of it that we can't measure, the effect it's had on morale on the local scene and local developers. And the stuff I'm seeing from them is surprisingly good. I mean, it's not going to be PUBG level, but it's you're able to create a different niche from it, right? So I don't see a problem with the developer side of things. Yes, the tournament organizers, yes, whatever Ishan and Nimish said, yes, there is concerns on that part of the fence. I agree 100%. I'm not going to discount that. But from a developer standpoint, these guys are up and ready to go. The morale is high. The work which I'm seeing is really good. So I'm not too worried about that. I think that piece will come together. Will it be able to cover out what we've lost? I don't think so. But it's a good way to keep people motivated. And more importantly, it's also awoken a lot of would-be investors in the scene. So out of nowhere, I've been getting calls from people who I haven't heard who have invested in gaming in the past, who suddenly woke up and like, oh, okay, so 10 cents not here, great. So how can we capitalize on this? Who do we speak to? How do we go about it? So I think it's going to lead to some very interesting developments from that standpoint. And I just look at it this way. I mean, I play a lot of this game called Civilization 6. There are different ways to win in that game. One of them is the economic victory, where you don't send your troops out to war. You use the economy and diplomacy to win. So seems like on a macro level, it seems like an economic play. So, but I think net for developers at least, it's going to be a fun time.
Sure. And Saloni, do you think banning apps are a good way to respond to territorial disputes such huge? And since China doesn't talk much, I don't know how deeply they are impacted, but it definitely impacted the Indian gaming industry in one way or the other. What are your views on that?
Yeah, I think we're seeing India is not the only country in this play. We're seeing this in the US. We're seeing this in Europe play out. We're seeing a rise of this techno nationalism where everybody is now becoming territorial and starting to protect their borders. And this is just and there is obviously this a few countries are and namely China is the main antagonist in this, but I don't think India is alone in taking such measures. Europe, in terms of data privacy, Europe took out GDPR mid last year, 2 years back, and India is now making the steps towards having a data privacy law, etc. So I think these are larger trends which are pointing towards all economies, all countries now becoming more territorial. So right now it may seem that this is in response to certain border disputes, etc. But I think there is a larger trend here which is starting to play out globally, to be honest, and we're going to see more of that.
Sure. And Nimish, I read this morning that players are not getting salaries because investors and sponsors are backing off. And Fnatic late last year announced its India roster for PUBG. What have you guys planned? And I'm also hearing that Tencent is in talks with the government to find ways to unban the ban, but then so was TikTok. I don't think that's going to be that easy or that soon. So what are your plans?
Well, I think for now, I think it's too early for anyone to kind of take a decision. I feel really sad for some of the orgs who have decided to shut shop and release their players. Of course, it is a financially tough time for everyone, and no different for Fnatic. I think, but knowing Sam and knowing Patrick, they've been in this industry for over a decade now, and they understand the players. They've been players themselves. So the first message that I got from everyone was that the players will be protected for the next 2 months for sure. Till we get a very clear answer from Tencent about what the future of this game is, and basis that is when we'll take a call. Because right now, anyone thinking of releasing their players or releasing their roster, I think is a little too premature. I understand that they have their own financial reasons to do that, but imagine if you release your players today and then 2 weeks down the line something goes right and the game's back. Then what do you do? So I think, and also as I said, when the ship goes down, the rats run away first. So just hang in there. I think that's what I've told my players. I think We all understand. We say COVID was one of the things that made everyone go crazy in 2020. Look at this as just another COVID for you guys, an extended COVID for the PUBG mobile players, where the shit's not over for you guys, right? The world is going to open and the economy is going to open. You guys are going to go deep down in a well that you don't know how to get out of. Right? Just hang in there and then let's see what happens. So that's pretty much what my plan is. Wait for a few
Stuff, yeah.
months and keep analyzing, keep talking to stakeholders.
Sure. And Ishan, the ban, of course, doesn't mark the end of the gaming industry. So let's hear from you about a way forward for the players and for the teams and for the sponsors, for the esports organizations and viewers. What do you think?
It's difficult, everyone's got a slightly different stake in all of it. Before the ban itself, we saw a lot of the popular PUBG Mobile team owners and organizations realize that now is the time to expand their foothold in esports and try and move beyond just PUBG with teams like Team Tamilas, Velocity, all expanding with teams that play Valorant now, and there are talks of other mainstream, popular top tier PUBG Mobile teams also now acquiring teams that will compete in esports outside of the PUBG Mobile space, which is more of a necessity now than a strategic move. But the early movers certainly have a bit of a leg up there. And from an organizer's point of view, it's always good to not be overly dependent on a single game or IP, because you never know when there will be such a big shift. Player bases for games go up and down, and an esport is only as relevant um, as the player base and viewing base. If there aren't enough viewers, there is no point to building an esports ecosystem around that game, because the only value you get out of it is engaging your player base who is going to come back and consume that content, not just continue to play your game. So it's always better to be in multiple spaces as an organizer, so that in times like this you don't end up taking too much of a hit.
Is this move going to change your investee selection strategy now?
Absolutely not. Nothing changes for us. To be honest, we came in with a very long-term long-term horizon for the market. We're a 10-year fund. We're here. We're patient capital. We're here to grow and catalyze the ecosystem. So for us, nothing changes.
I don't even know why we are having this discussion, because you know what, PUBG is still working for those who have it downloaded. It's working for me. So the ban so far has impacted only new users. And but anyway, Rishi, do you think even if Tencent is able to sort things with the
Sorry.
government, it will again get its status quo back? And last one for you.
I mean, yeah, even if they do come back, it's a question of when, right? Because if I look at what's happened in other spaces, if you look at what happened after TikTok ban, right? There were a couple of other apps that came up. They didn't catch as much traction as people would expect. So, and the app that gained the most outside of TikTok's ban was Instagram. Everyone moved there. Reels has been doing really well for them, and the way they've displayed it in India is also different versus other parts of the world. So I think it's going to be, in the short term, if it comes back, yeah, in the short term, they'll be able to recoup, and it'll actually be beneficial in the short term. But if it's going to take a longer period of time, right? If we're looking at maybe a return in a year or so, people would have moved on by then. So it's a question of when. And I do think that we are going to see some interesting moves because of it, particularly on the development side. So I think we just have to wait and watch. But short term, if they manage to come back within a year, great for them, great for everyone, business as usual. But if it's longer than that, then people would have moved on. And I mean, it's something their competitors already know about, right? Garena sees this as an opportunity. Activision sees this as an opportunity. Even if Riot decides to get its act together, they can come in and do something. But I mean, as Nimish even said, right? Apex, to me, Apex Legends is one game that I can actually come in and take and do something. The mobile version of that has been in the works for a long time. It's been mentioned in several investor calls by EA. So, and the game has good traction here on PC and console anyway. It's a proven game. So we could see them come in and take things out. But would that change and I don't think these would be impacted necessarily if PUBG came back or not. So I just think it's a question of how soon they manage to come back more than anything else.
I agree. Yeah. So, Nimish and Ishan, final question to both of you, and this is the same one. Nimish, you can go first. And this is about the opportunities that the ecosystem now has, and what will it take to capitalize onto them?
I think the important thing that people need to understand here is that the and this was obviously this was one of the ideas that I had, and I think for some reasons India loves franchising for everything, you know, for everything. You know, unless it is a franchise, nobody wants to take it seriously, right? I think it's a matter of maybe the reality is that there are only 8 or 9 players or 10 players who actually have the money to sustain multiple esports title players, and you know, and once anything is in a franchise format, you know, it's a 10-year horizon anyways. No one's going to ask you for returns on investment. You keep pumping in the money, you know. It's I think it's a matter of somebody with deep pockets just sitting there and be like, hey, how can I make this happen? You know, and there are ways and means to make it happen if they really want to. Otherwise, like as she said, like, you know, no one's gonna wait for PUBG Mobile to come back for a year. People will wait maybe for 2 months or 3 months and they'll move on, right? The problem is not with them moving on. The problem is how big the ecosystem will be when they move on. You know, the reality is that we will move on, but if that moving on is going to take us 5 years behind, 6 years behind, back to the days where it's only entity and global esports trying to fight each other in a Counter-Strike tournament that is watched by 500 people, like, you know, that's not what you want to go back to, right? And I think that's the fear that everyone has, saying that if we have to go back to that, then it's like literally not everyone on this panel, but at least me and Ishan need to like go and look for another job or a different industry, right? And I think that's my biggest fear. But I do feel that there are multiple models that can be worked out. I think the two most important people here would be the tournament organizers and to a certain level some of the media houses. I think these two guys need to understand the long-term play in building an ecosystem. Whether it's Nodwin, whether it's Star, whether it's Sony, whether it's Geo, whoever that is, right? The long-term play needs to come in now. You know, whether you make money or don't make money, are you willing to invest for the next 10 years is the question. And I think if that question is a no, then as I said, then might as well all of us just pack the bags and forget about it, because the investment is required now.
More than I definitely think is gonna stay.
No.
Ishan,
when I say they're gonna stay in the sense, I'm not saying it from that perspective. I'm saying because I understand Nodwin really well and I've seen their business model really well, right? I would say they have invested in stuff that is not popular, but it's not at the same level as PUBG Mobile, right? So somebody needs to be like, listen, even if this game is not popular, I'm gonna still put in $1 million if required.
I agree.
You know?
Yes.
Something like what happened with Kabaddi. It's a bad example, but it's like somebody took a punt, right? And they said that, okay, you know what? I'm going to put in the required marketing push and the required money behind this. Whether it works or not, nobody knew that. Season 1, I remember, season 1, you could buy a title sponsorship for PKL for 1 crore. And even then, nobody bought it. You know, versus season 5, you know, where they closed it with Vivo for like 300 crore. You know? So somebody needs to do that with esports, saying that I'm going to take that big punt and this is the kind of money I'm going to put on table. Maybe that's the solution.
Yeah, a lot of it is on brands. Ishan, what do you think?
Definitely, you know, for the industry to really move forward, you know, it doesn't matter PUBG or no PUBG. There needs to be a long-term plan. You see, PUBG Mobile, it's something where, you know, Tencent is happy just you know, acknowledging, yes, there are, you know, 10-15 different organizers who are themselves are bringing in money. We will just fit them into our calendars so that you know, it makes our entire PUBG Mobile ecosystem look amazing. But there's no real you know, maybe 10-year esport vision that helps grow it into a global juggernaut, right? They're happy with like, okay, you know, this is it, we're good with that. There needs to be a bit more on the ground level. You know, they've done a lot of work with their you know, national campaigns with PMCO, you know, PMPL, and I think PMIS. There's just so many names that it's a bit confusing, really. But you know, that's where esports in India has truly fallen behind. You know, organizers aren't willing to make the investment. Publishers aren't sure whether it's going to pay off. The only reason, PUBG Mobile, they took that gamble. They saw the popularity of the content creators, the streamers. They leveraged that to turn it into a massive esports ecosystem. But beyond that, there was never the intention initially to build up that esports ecosystem, right? It just they sort of stumbled upon it. And no other publisher seems to be moving anywhere in that direction. So from our side, as an organizer, we, at whatever scale is possible just by ourselves, are looking that, hey, at least our activities, we want to create a base that we ourselves continue to build upon over the next few years so that we can sustain it. Because as an organizer, unless there is a player base that's interested in competing, that is growing as well with month over month participation, viewership, there is no point to what you're doing. If you're just operating quarter to quarter, or okay, we did this year, let's see if we can do something different or something more exciting next year, you're never really gonna get esports to the next level. You need to consciously sit down, have a roadmap that, all right, this is how we are going to continue to scale the opportunities, continue to groom that esports talent in the country, so that more and more players are going to see that opportunity and start taking interest in it. And that's why we're experimenting with different forms of long format esports and leagues, which is essential to the growth of esports.
Sure, absolutely, Ishan. It was wonderful chatting up with you guys, Ishan, Rishi, Nimish, and Saloni. Wonderful chatting up with all of you. And thank you so much for joining us. I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you.